shining through the darkness of the longest night. We are crossing the water our whole life through. We are making a passage that is straight and true. Every heart is a vessel, every dream is a light, shining through the darkness of the longest night. We are crossing the water our whole life through. We are making a passage that is straight and true. Every heart is a vessel, every dream is a light, shining through the darkness of the longest night. Shining through the darkness of the
Welcome to each one of you. We are so glad you're here. Thankful that you're here for this evening of celebrating the return of the light. Just a few days to come. So, this all began 38 years ago. Can you picture it? All the people on the stage just about were in their 20s and 30s. Now look at us. How old do you think we are now? 50, 60, 70, 38 years. It's a pretty long time, don't you think? As a matter of fact, on the stage and sitting behind us, there are, I think we decided, 8 decades of performers. The youngest one was not born when this began. Can you guess who that is? How many people in the audience were not born in December 1985? Oh, we got a few. Wow, welcome. By 38 years, in the real world, every World Cup soccer player has retired. But us? No. By 38 years, many ballet dancers, pros like my brother Paul was, they retired 10 years already. But us? No. By Jesus. 38 years. The youngest person in this audience here tonight, in 38 years, will be over 40 years old. That's my friends Milo and Ezra. Can that ever be possible? Back then, way at the beginning, we were bright-eyed youngsters who thought the best way to approach the longest night of the year was to fill. And I mean fill it with story and song and music and merriment. That was then. Now, we're still a brand of bright-eyed elders, so to speak, except for a few of us. And we take the term fill lightly. I mean, back then, we almost won the Guinness Book of World Records. We almost won the longest running concert back then, but now we use the word fill lightly. Fill, can you picture it, is maybe 2.5 hours. What do you think? A little better? So, a little housekeeping. You might need a bathroom. Who knows where the bathrooms are? Few. Down the stairs and to the left. At intermission, There's lots of baked goods. Raise your hand if you made some baked goods. And some yummy things. That is also down the stairs to the left, and there's a big room back there. Come on down and join us. This is a benefit concert, as it has been for all these years, for the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, and organization that supports, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. How would you say it in a sentence? That supports the native journey. How about that? Is that all right? Okay. Ohketeau, and you will find out what that means at the beginning of the second half. I like to think of this one evening of the year in this way. We've been doing it for many years, and we've begun to see that today you'll hear 21 different acts, this being the third one, right? 21 different acts. And I've come to think of it like beating a necklace. Each one a beautiful jewel, right? Each one a little gift of light to bring to the world on this darkest night. That's all. So, you and your family, you can stay just as long as you want to. You can cuddle together on the pews. You could lay down and take a nap. Or you could choose to get up and go. And if you do choose to get up and go, please do it in between acts or at intermission. Fair enough? And know that we are waving you a quiet goodbye with great hopes that you will have a year full of laughter and light. Thanks for being here. What an honor to be with you tonight.
As we're getting started, I want to thank Bekki Tippens and the Roundhouse. For many, many years, that's where we would be. How many people got to come to the stories at the Roundhouse? It's such a special, special place. So what's exciting is that the Ashfield Church, and thank you so much for hosting us, still has that same feeling. So we bring that spirit. We are Earth. So as the darkest day comes on, we feel it because we are Earth. And we hear the Earth talking about regeneration. Ohketeau. So important to say this word, to bring forth the Nipmuc language, and to honor that Rhonda Anderson, who we'll be hearing from in the second half, and Larry Spotted Crow Man, created the Ohketeau Cultural Center. So at this moment, when the company said, well, let's do a land acknowledgement, I said, I'd like to be the speaker because for me it's not an add-on, but for a couple of years it's something I do every morning, as I live right by the Pecumtuck River, shallow sandy river. And I wanted to speak with the sense of being partners in truth. So this is helping us see the full continuity of Native presence. Let us be partners in truth, that this would be a winter camp area. And just really feel that we bring our feet down. David Brule spoke here a couple of weeks ago. He was one of the 3 founders of Nolambika who were dedicated to accurate First Nations history. And so he was saying, to the best of his understanding, this would be winter camp. And there's so much travel and migration and interconnection. But I wanted to have us picture this huge Pecumtuck Confederacy down the long tidal river, Quinnipiac, to feel that here's the Agawam, here's the Nonotuck, and this huge, huge group of people, 9,000 years. So we're partners in truth and really taking that in. If you travel to the east, past the Nipmuc people, just even taking Martha's Vineyard, the current name, there were, I believe it's 3,000 Wampanoags who lived on that island. So we feel before the decimation, before, there was just to feel how many people, first peoples. The second part of being partners in truth is what should never have happened. The colonizers coming, bringing on purpose disease, trying to wipe out languages, trying to move all the people out. So let us all stand as partners in truth. And so we just, in a really honest way, feel it, care about it. And then the third part of being partners in truth is honoring what Ohketeau is doing, the continuity, that no matter what terrible violations were happening, that First Nation spirit is alive, is forever. So we come together tonight feeling the regeneration of the earth, and what a beautiful time of storytelling. And it would only be fitting, Jennifer Lee made these baskets. So this gives us a sense of the Woodlands people. She is herself Northern Narragansett. I just so much want you to see these. So can feel the stretching back in time, the making of these baskets and this dipping basket. And so with these, we join together as partners of truth.
Hello, Mike, are you there? Yes, you are. Yay! Hi, honey, thank you for helping me. So I am going to be your introducer for the evening of Act One. Now, why, you may ask, are you having an introducer? We got a program in front of us. I know, but I am introducing by telling a little teensy-weensy bit about each of your tellers. I mean, part of that reason is selfish because, as John mentioned, we're having downstairs an intermission, and that intermission is schmooze time, where you all get to come together and form a little community. But we thought if you knew a little bit about us and something resonated, that, there's a way in which to approach and about something, and wouldn't that be fun? And well, there we go. So that is what I intend to do. But I want to, I also want to point out one other thing. I told all of the performers for this evening that I was wanting their bios. So what I did was pretty much write down what they sent to me. So I'll be kind of reading it most of the time, but it's all in their own words because you'll see why. I want to backtrack a little bit because as you entered, you had a little music to kind of dance in by that was given to you by banjo player Sonny Crawford, who I was trying to think today, how long? I mean, Sonny probably has been with us at least half of those 38 years that John was talking about. Are you raising your hand? Yes? I'm sorry, you can't hear?
I think so.
Oh.
I believe for about that long.
Oh, good. Well, we have an agreement, guys.
I think he's competing with Sonny. For
Well,
longevity.
no, he can't. The pure longevity, Gary. And anyway, Sonny writes, retired high school and French teacher. And he says he currently does maniacal, his words, tree work and illustrations for nonprofit causes. I don't know, maybe some of you have seen these illustrations. He's had actual exhibits of his work. They're unbelievably beautiful, so keep your eye out for Sonny's beautiful artistry. And he also rides as a nationally certified EMT in the ambulance of his hometown of Charlemont. And he has now successfully limited himself to less than a dozen hobbies, making, he says, Sonny, unnecessary banjo racket, combative letters to the editor. I don't know if any of you have seen them. They're excellent. It's a reason to get the recorder. And he also makes really fun satirical political skits. He patrols ski slopes, and he heats using used French fry oil. And he concludes with, he loves sailing as if he knew how. But he hopes that when he matures, people will come to appreciate him. Come on, let's give him a round of applause. Our first performer tonight is Rob Peck. Rob is a professional juggler, motivational speaker, author, humorist, recovering perfectionist. And his credits include CBS, NBC, CNBC, Harvard, and the Smithsonian. And true to the title of his book, It's a Juggle Out There, Rob is dedicated to the proposition that less stress equals more zest. Please welcome Robbie.
Look, Ma, no hands, the soccer slogan of the World Cup, is also the title of this autobiographical tale. Full disclosure, 89% of which is absolutely accurate. The other 31% is pure poetic license. You do the math. But I'll give you a hint. The beginning is entirely true. In my early 20s, taking a balanced approach to higher education, I attended both the University of Pennsylvania and Antic Arts Clown College, graduating the former Phi Beta Kappa and the latter magna cum laude. Now, the reason that I got such high honors at Antic Arts, affectionately known as Our Lady of the Last Laugh, stems from two things: happy socks and a senior thesis on how clowns have had to rediscover the wheel in order to unicycle and juggle at the same time. Doing both without breaking my neck was so daunting, it could explain why I took a temporary leave of abstinence. I flew off to my favorite country, Ireland, in order to be with my dear lifelong friend, Gary Cannon, by the banks of the Shannon. My first day, Gary says, "You gotta discover the verdant countryside. What do you say? Let's go out on a bike ride." It was beautiful. My second big discovery was an album with the alluring title, Old Hag, You Have Killed Me, by the Bothy Band, the bad boys of Irish music. The first cut was the Kesh jig, and the second it started, I wanted to juggle for joy. I mean, the music, I learned that if I was looking for some infectious rhythm, Kesh was like cash money. I wish you could hear it right now. The bad news is, Old Hag has gone out of print. The brilliant news is, the new hag, handsome devil Tim Van Egmond, is going to now perform as the one-man Bothy Band. Good thing I actually caught them, otherwise that would have been a very good time to lie down on the pews for a nap. Music that was that moving, I couldn't help falling in love with the Bothy Band. I learned all about all 5 members. And so it was that on one fine day, after spending most of an afternoon listening to every track on Old Hag You Have Killed Me, juggling along and trying to learn how to play the Kesh jig on the tin whistle. It wasn't pretty. I tried and I tried, and eventually I decided to just go outside, and maybe even though it was getting on dusk, I could clear my head and just take a lovely ride. So I packed a few provisions, and I put them in the little basket that was in front below the handlebars, and I strapped on the helmet, and I hopped on the bike, and I took off. And wouldn't you know it, 2 miles into the ride, the Kesh jig starts playing in my mind, and before I know it, I'm pedaling right in time. But as the tune speeds up, I start perspiring so profusely, I have to pull over so I can take off my sweater. I prop the bike up against a nearby birch, unstrap the helmet, strip off the sweater, roll it up, put it in the basket, decide, what the heck, it's a little country lane, there's no traffic anyway, I don't need this helmet. Put the helmet in next to the sweater, and there in between them is the tin whistle. And suddenly, I had what we say in French, une idée du tonnerre, a thunderous idea. I thought to myself, if I can unicycle and juggle at the same time, surely on 2 wheels I could balance and be able to practice the Kesh jig on the whistle. After a few preliminary pedals, I really got the hang of it, and after a while I could stay straight up just using my feet. Look, Ma, no hands. And I started playing the whistle. I got a teeny bit better. But then there was this one little passage that I couldn't quite get. It was like that part of the song went blank in my head. I was so close. I wanted to get it so bad. I closed my eyes in order to concentrate more keenly. And there in the dark, the very part of the song that had been eluding me, it's playing sweetly. There! That's it! That's the part! I can do this! I know I can! I got it! Bang! The front wheel jams into a concrete curb. And the next thing I know, I'm airborne. I hurtle head over heels over the handlebars, on what is a short flight that is sure to have a crash landing. Splat! I hit down. I'm sure without a helmet, I'm going to crack my skull on the asphalt. Amazingly, I've soared past the pavement and land in a bush whose thick branches break my fall. Instantly, I'm bathed in a beam of light from a large van's headlamps. Glory be, it's the return of the light. I'm alive. I'll live to tell this tale. It was exactly at that moment that I made the unhappy discovery that I was lying ankles to Adam's apple in a bramble bush whose thick branches, the same ones that broke my fall, were now stabbing my flesh with sharp thorns. In mid-ouch, I heard a door open and a loud brogue say, "Lad, are you okay? I saw the whole thing with my own eyes. If you landed safely, I'll be so happy." And I look up and I say, I'm okay. Hell, saints be praised. I'll tell you, lad, somewhere there must be a leprechaun that loves you. I said, "What's your name?" He says, "Call me Donald." I said, "I'm Ron." There was something about Donald that was familiar, but in the moment, I couldn't place it. He says, "Here, lad, take me hand. I'll help you get out of that bloody pricker bush." By the time I'm standing on my feet, I am dripping blood and every limb has been lacerated. Donald says, "Look at you, lad. You're a sight. I gotta get you back to me place where I can wash you and give you some bandages." I said, "Thank you." And he leads me down to the road, and there's my busted bicycle. He says, "Oh, I've taken the odd bike ride myself. I'll put back at me shed. There's a spare rim. I'll have you back on your way in no time." And he reaches down and puts the bike in the back of his van, closes the door, and as he does, I see a decal with a very familiar logo. It's the one I used to see on the back of Old Hag, You Have Killed Me. And I look up at him and I say, "Cool, you're a fellow Bothy band fan. They're the best." And he says, "You don't say." And he says, "Get in the van. We've got to get you back before you bleed to death." Well, I was losing so much blood that the rest is pretty much a blur. But I can tell you that Donald was true to his word. He cleaned all my cuts, he bandaged me, and he even fixed my bike to boot. And after a bite to eat and a pint of stout, I was sufficiently revived to go back into the gloaming and find my way home. Right at the door, Donald stops me. He says, "Lad, there's just one thing I've been meaning to ask you. When you went sore and hurtling over them handlebars, what was it that you were holding so tight in your hand?" Sheepishly I said, "My tin whistle." "Blimey. And pray tell, what would you be doing trying to play the tin whistle in midair?" And I said, "Well, I was trying to do the B part of the Kesh Jake, but I got a little stuck." He says, "Well, if that tune is so dear to your ear, I can't let you leave without learning it. Now hold on just a wee bit while I locate my own Michael Burke whistle. It's a beauty, isn't it? It was gifted to me by me bandmate, Paddy Keenan." "Paddy Keenan? Wait, you down Lunny, the bouzouki player of the Bothy band." "Aye, guilty as charged. And if memory serves, this would be the B part on Old Hag, as played by the Bothy band." Thank you, and a special hand for the one-man Bothy band, 10 Band. Back to you, Bekki.
Our next teller, Jay Goldspinner, to me is a model. She's an example that a person truly grows and deepens as they age. And I've seen that recently. Just be beautiful. Jay writes, Jay is an old woman who lives in Greenfield near the Connecticut River. She has been telling stories of the solstice celebration for more than 38 years. And her stories remind us that light returns even in the darkest hours. And tonight, she is sharing a piece from the sacred Hindu Upanishads called The Birth of the Sun.
People in India have been telling this story for thousands of years. In the beginning, this earth was nothing. It was non-being. Slowly, non-being became being. It developed into an egg. That egg lay there for a whole year. Then it split open in 2 pieces. One piece was silver, the other was gold. The silver piece became the earth. The golden piece was the sky. And what was born from that egg was the sun, the beautiful sun. When the sun was born, there were shouts and cheers and singing. All beings and all desires rose to greet the sun. And so, when the sun rises in the morning, when the sun sets in the evening, and when the sun returns from behind dark clouds, there are shouts and cheers and singing. All beings and all desires rise to greet it. And so do we. Welcome, sun.
Sarah Pirtle is our next teller. She makes her home in Shelburne Falls, and she is also a poet and storyteller with a great love of songwriting, and she has made over 9 recordings. And I just want to point out, folks, that in the back there are both books and recordings of your various tellers here, so if you're interested, you can go and check those out. But back to Sarah. Sarah concentrates and studies about the centuries before warfare. And she's also the author of 5 books, including An Outbreak of Peace. And she's been fascinated with the new Grange Neolithic site in Ireland where the sun lights up one chamber precisely at the winter solstice. And she will tell a story called the New Grange solstice about a young girl visiting there who suddenly time travels back 5,000 years. But following her story, she will sing with Norma Jean Haynes. Not to interrupt the flow of their presentation, I want to share a little bit right now about Norma Jean. She is from Florence and is the author of the book, Make Music. Her CD of original songs is Mother and Daughters. She has studied claw hammer banjo all over Appalachia and learned traditional songs and dances with village harmony in Bosnia, South Africa, and Corsica. She currently attends Smith College. Welcome, Sarah.
Sometimes if you stand in a place where you haven't been before, you can gain courage. I speak as 16-year-old Maeve, who lives around here. So many people have asked me how I got my name Maeve, and what I have to explain is that it's a Gaelic name. My ancestors are Irish. One time I was standing by my favorite tree, and I kept imagining that I could reach somebody way, way back in Ireland whose name, a girl or a woman, was also Maeve. So I love to look at books about Ireland. And I was particularly fascinated by a book about a place right above Dublin called Newgrange. When I ran in to show my mom, we looked at it together and found out that at the top of this big chamber, exactly the start of the winter solstice, in comes the light, and it lights up the place. And I wanted to be there. Oh, Mom, can we go there? But it turned out that the place is really small. It's so much smaller than where we are. It's like that big. And so in order to go there at that wonderful time, so many people wanted to do it, they had a lottery. So my mom put our names in year after year. And it never worked. I mean, you can imagine how many people wanted to do the same thing. It wasn't far-fetched that I would be able to go to Dublin because my mom works internationally with teachers, and she trains about she trains about nonviolence. She talks about how children can get along with each other, which was really tricky because what was happening for me in my elementary school, 2 girls right away began to make mocking rhymes with my name. And as we got older, through middle school and high school, it pretty much didn't end. I mean, it wasn't something I could put my finger on, but I knew it was happening. And so the teachers, the principal, nobody was stopping it. I used to be a really happy person, pretty much. But I have to admit, I shouldn't say I've given up, but I'm really dejected. So my mom said, I wish we could go there to Newgrange. There might be something about that full light that would help you, sweetie. Okay. Last year at this time, yes, we won the lottery. At least the lottery to Newgrange. And you can imagine what it was like. So we flew to Dublin, and then it's just about an hour north. We done a lot of preparation. We learned you have to imagine a roof box at the top, and then it takes 60 feet for the light to come into the chamber. My mom showed me a book to help me understand, 5,200 years ago, what would it be like? She explained that there was an archaeologist so devoted to learning about old Europe. She had 12 books. Her name was Maria Gimbutas, and the pottery would have the spirals. And she said, Maria Gimbutas found out for those 9,000 years that you couldn't find weapons, that the graves were equal. And I said, Mom, but we know there's always been war. Oh, no. Hasn't that been taught to you in school? No, there hasn't always been war. Hey, I'm going to make a timeline here. So, this is the oldest piece of art, which is about 40,000 years old. And this is today. So when, in this timeline, when do you think war began? Well, I tried this out. I said, no, all of this time. So the men would hunt, and they would thank the animals. The women were the ones who would help with the cooperation, make sure there's enough food for everybody. Learning, like if you learned about how to make a certain kind of pottery or wonderful seeds, you'd share them with other people. It wasn't fear of strangers. So widespread warfare happened here. And once the warriors came in, it was really hard to fight. I mean, if you fought back, you were joining it. Within 2,000 years, there was a pretty big takeover. So that today, it just seems normal, but it wasn't. When we're in there, when we go into the chamber, let's remember all those years when we were joining with people. Well, you can imagine how excited everybody was around us. We're all like, when did you find out? Have you been trying for several years? And we're just waiting in line. And then I had read that there was going to be, you'd call it a curb around the chamber. It was all made of white quartz and this beautiful decorated entrance. And then I noticed the extra people. There were these extra people. They were standing a little at the side. They were watching us, talking with each other. And there was, one of the extra people was a girl who wore a goatskin cloak. She had long brown braids. And she came up to me and began talking. And I couldn't understand her language. I wanted to. So very easily, we used mind stretch. And we began, well, I learned that her name was Maeve. And she also began to really, understand me, kind of get the story of what was happening for me. She said, we don't have bullying. I am so sorry that happened to you. So as we got closer, I really wanted to stay with her. And the line began to move. We began to walk in. So we get to our narrow entranceway. Maeve is here. And she just walked through the stone, pretty much. So on the other side, we were together again. She dissolved and reformed, and she pointed her finger to the back wall. Now, I had read that there was going to be this triple spiral, and we stood by it. And she talked with her hands, and I knew she was saying, the spirals were saying that the people knew how to be in tune with the moon and the sun and the changes and go with the changes. Because death, then there was regeneration. And as she talked with her hands, I tried it as well. And she told me many things that I can't even put into words, except to show you some of her language. And then she said, what we know is that we all belong. We all belong together. And that's when the light came. It came down. It's like feeling something land on your shoulders. Oh, and I breathed it in. And then, I guess as the sun was climbing, the light inside the chamber got wider and wider. And I felt my arms going with it like I had wings. And I wanted to remember. And Maeve said, let me give you 3 gifts, like for the 3 spirals. Okay. First gift. You have a forever heart. We all do. You have a candle in your heart that's forever. And she said, I can see that your light has grown dim. So she walked closer and helped brighten my light. And then she gave me, it was like a tangle of thread, and I stretched it, and it became a web. She said, bring this. Open your shoulders, open the web. Take this wherever you go. So I took these two gifts this last year. I would try to remember, even if I'm sitting in a class, like, okay, everybody here, we all have a forever candle. And then as I would see the two girls, instead of like staying away, like far away, I would remember opening the web. And then I tried inviting them, and then they invite me, and we invite other people. It all began to shift. I want you to have the gifts too, okay? We each have a forever candle, and let's send that light to each other. And we each can hold the web and open it. I said 3 gifts for the 3 spirals. The third gift, she said, the time you live, there's a lot of chaos and fear, isn't there? Don't forget regeneration. She said, you'll need to be mending the web your whole life. So I give you this golden needle and this golden thread. All your life, you will be a mender, and so will all your friends. So I give you each a golden needle and a golden thread. And a folk singer heard that on the wind from all these years, this truth. Oh, had I a golden thread.
Oh, had I a golden thread and needle so fine, I would weave in the magic strand of rainbow design. Of rainbow design. In it I weave the bravery of women giving birth. In it I weave the innocence of children on this earth. Children all over this earth. To all of my siblings, I stretch my rainbow band. All over the waters, so all would understand. So all would understand. Oh, had I a golden thread. Oh, had I a golden thread, and needle so fine, and needle so fine, I would weave a magic strand. I would weave a magic strand, rainbow design, of rainbow design, of rainbow design.
Thank you, Christy. Norma Jean is going to sing a song. It's about Julian of Norwich, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about her before the song. She's often associated with winter solstice because she lived during plague times. She was called Anchoress. She was anchored in a room with bars because people would come to the window and talk with her. They would call out their despair. And Julian of Norwich over and over again would say, all will be well. So Meg Barnhouse wrote this song.
I said, Julian, you are holy, you are holding my hand, and Julian, you are holy, you are holding my hand. I said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things can be well. I said, Julian, do you not know about sorrow? And Julian, do you not know about pain? I said, Julian, do you not know about hunger? And Julian, do you not know about shame? She said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. I said, Julian, do you not know about loneliness? And Julian, do you not know about disease? I said, Julian, do you not know about cruelty? I said, Julian, it's too much, it brought me to my knees. She said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, no one does not know about sorrow, and no one does not know about pain. She said, no one does not know about hunger. She said, no one does not know about shame. She said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, no one does not know about loneliness, and no one does not know about disease. She said, no one does not know about cruelty. She says, I know it's too much, it brought me to my knees, where I heard, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. I said, Julian, you are holy, you are holding my hand. I said, Julian, you are holy, you are holding my hand. She said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. She said, all will be well, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for...
I'm going to be telling the next story. And one thing about me is that since I was little, I've always loved theater and acting, and later storytelling. And I think particularly storytelling since I have had my own grandchildren. And I have one who is, she doesn't stop. Tell me another story, Baba B. So a shout out to them on Zoom tonight. Here's yet another story. One thing I also love to do is to bring people together who come from different cultural backgrounds and see how we can bridge those differences. And for that purpose, I created the Roundhouse. And one delegation of people that I had at the house continually were from both Ukraine and Russia. And tonight, in that spirit of wanting to make connection and bring that love back into the world, I want to tell you a story that hails primarily from Russia, but maybe this winter's night, some mama is telling this story to her little one as he goes off into his wintry dreamland. The Snow Maiden. It was a winter's day, and an older couple sat inside their woodland home at a table, hands around a warm cup of tea. And they were reminiscing about their life together. It's been a good one, they smiled to one another. And then they started sharing anecdote upon situation and burst into laughter, louder and louder, until they heard some laughter outside. At first they thought it was their echo. And then they realized it was children who were playing outside. And then they both took a simultaneous sigh coming from a place of deep disappointment, for the one regret that they had in their life was that they were never able to birth children. But before they allowed themselves to wallow in their sorrow, the husband got up with a burst of energy, knocking his chair down at the same time, then grabbing his wife's hand and said, "Let us go outside and make a snow girl, just like the daughter that we always wanted to have." And now, their snow person was not anything like the typical snow person that we make over here with a one round head and the next round chest and the bigger round base with little pieces of charcoal for the mouth and the coal eyes and the carrot for no. Theirs is going to be as beautiful as the sculpture you might see in the museum. And they wanted her to look as lovely as the Tsarina's daughter. And luck of all lucks, they had the perfect sculpting snow. So they made her, well, maybe even taller than they were. And they cloaked her in this shuba, which is a beautiful winter coat that had fur trim on its sleeve, nice and thick. And then they put a trim of thick fur all down the front. And then they made a hat, and they put a fur trim around that. But they also had this implement that you could use to smooth down the snow so that the shuba looked as though it were made of suede. But it also, this instrument, had a pointy end to it, and in it they used it to make beautiful designs like embroidery all over that shuba. It was truly a work of great artistry. They took particular care on sculpting the face, for they wanted her eyes to show both delight and wonder. And they wanted her cheeks to be nice and wide, and they wanted her mouth to look as though she was just about to burst into song. As they were working on the lips, they suddenly noticed that they appeared to color. They took on a hue of pink that grew darker until it turned into a deep red. And then they heard a sound like coming from within their sculpture that sounded like the larks of spring singing to one another. And the couple, they stood back in amazement and wondered what in heaven's name, and they just looked at their snow sculpture, and they saw, as she blinked her eyes, moved her lips, then her hands, and raised her arms, and before you know it, she had turned into a real live being. Well, not only was the couple completely amazed, and they were also absolutely overjoyed. And they took this magical young woman by her hand and welcomed her into their house as if she were their daughter who had been away on a long trip and was finally coming home. And they decided to name her Snow Maiden. Now, Snow Maiden was a dream of a young woman. I mean, not only was she lovely, but she was kind, she was considerate, respectful, helpful, and affectionate. And she loved to go outside. She loved the feel of that cold air on her skin, that nip of frost in the air. And she loved to go out into the forest and look and see if she could follow the tracks and find some animals to play with. Sometimes she would make a little snowball and toss it and play games of fetch or catch with these animals. But then the warm sun of spring began to heat the land, and Snow Maiden grew withdrawn, and she stood off to herself and appeared very, very sad. Her parents wondered if she was ill. "Are you feeling all right, my darling?" "No," she demurred. I'm fine." But clearly, something was not all right. And as that warm spring brought forth the blooms in the meadows, and the larks did begin to sing with all of the beauty of their voices, she became sadder and sadder still. Except there was one day when all of a sudden the sky turned the whole sky, a dark slate blue, and from it fell big balls of hail that to Snow Maiden were like pearls falling from the heaven. She was absolutely overjoyed as she caught them. And when they melted, she cried. And now, summer was fully here, and one day, some young girls from the village came by her house and called out, "Snow Maiden, we're going for a picnic in the woods. Come and join us." "Well, no, I have things that I have to do. It's okay." But her parents pushed her. "Snow Maiden, go with them. You'll have some fun." Well, the girls, as they were walking along, they sang in harmonies with one another and danced all the while, and they had such a lovely time. But Snow Maiden, she just trailed behind like a bashful puppy. They finally came to the woods, and they found a open glen, and they put their cloth down so they could have a proper picnic. And Snow Maiden still, she sat over to the side. She did everything she could to avoid that sun's rays coming down on her. But soon enough, night fell. Now Snow Maiden could raise her head and take a breath, and the girls, they decided, hey, let's stay out here some more. Let's make a fire. So they gathered up some twigs, and they made a little fire, and they were singing and dancing all around it. And Snow Maiden thought, this looks kind of fun. And she got up, and she joined them, and she danced, and she laughed, and she sang. She hadn't had so much fun since the winter time. And then the girls decided that they would have a little game, and that was this little fire that they had, that they would each, one in their turn, jump over it. When it was Snow Maiden's turn, she took a deep breath and leaped. And when she got to the apex of her jump, right above that fire, in a snap of the fingers, like that, she melted. And she turned into a white cloud that ascended into the heavens. Now, the girls say that they heard her say, goodbye. But it would not be goodbye forever. For every winter, when the snows cover the land, that cloud re-embodies into Snow Maiden. And over the centuries, Grandfather Frost has taken her under his care. And when it comes New Year's, they together travel in a sleigh across the land, giving presents to little children, and the wish that they would laugh and play and dance to the beauty of the snow. And now we're going to be treated with another one of our guest performers, the Brian Bender and Robbie Roiter Jazz Duo. As they're coming up, let me tell you a little background on them. Brian, who plays trombone, piano, and sings, and Robbie plays guitar and more, but they have also performed frequently. You may have seen them before throughout the valley and beyond. Brian is also a member of, well, a bazillion different music groups, including the Butterfly Swing Band, the Wholesale Klezmer Band, the World Music Pangians, the Elixir Contra Dance Band, the Gumbo Jumbo Dixieland Band, and more. And Robbie also performs frequently as a solo performance guitarist, and also is a member of the Butterfly Spring Band. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I've really enjoyed all of the wonderful stories and songs. We're going to do an oldie but a goodie for you. It's sort of a nice song about optimism.
direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. Do you hear the pitter-patter? And that happy tune is yours too. Life can be so sweet on the sunny, sunny side of the street. I used to walk in the shade with those blues on parade, but I'm not afraid. This rover crossed over. If I never had a cent, I'll be rich as Elon Musk. I set my feet on the sunny, sunny side of the street. Let's hear some Robbie. We have a surprise for you. My talented, beautiful wife, Anna Sobel, is here. Storyteller, puppeteer, musician, mom, all those things. And we're going to sing a piece called Centerpiece.
arms around you. Our happiness will never cease. Nothing's any good without you. 'Cause baby, you're my centerpiece. We'll build a house in garden somewhere along a country road of peace. We'll live a cottage on the outskirts where we can really find release. But nothing's any good without you. 'Cause baby, you're my centerpiece.
John Porcino is our last teller before we have our intermission and schmooze time. And John hails from a co-housing community in Amherst, but he is also celebrating now 40 years, weaving together threads of laughter and insight into the world as a storyteller, musician, arts educator, games leader, keynote speaker, and camp director. His work has brought him from Maine to the Barbados and from California to the New York Island. There have been, he says, bumbling bumps and bruises along the way, but mostly more joy and goodness than anyone could ever hope for in this long, lovely career that John chose as a bright-eyed young man back in 1982. John.
Well, another string to add to that necklace of jewels, right? So let me ask, how many people here just love it when winter comes? Just love when you get 2 feet of snow that you have to rake off the roof. Well, I want you to know that this particular night, want to know how long it is? How long? That's another story. 15 hours, 55 minutes, and 10 seconds. In a few days, December 21st, the actual winter solstice, the day will be 15 hours, 55 minutes, and 29 seconds. 19 seconds longer, but the next day will be 15 hours, 55 minutes, and 28 seconds. Giving us all one extra glorious second of light. And I want to say, before I begin telling my story, it is light to find a way to enjoy that long, cold, and yes, sometimes hard winter. Is it ever hard for you? Even for a winter lover like me, it's hard. And if nothing else can bring you light, you can remember this. After winter, you know what comes? The glorious spring. Fair enough? On that premise, I tell you this little story from my life. I love how life gives you stories. So here we go. Gifts. Who gives gifts this time of year? Can I see? Kids, too. Who receives gifts this time of year? Yeah. Most of us. I'm lucky, like you. I have people who love me in my life. We are so lucky. And they look out for me, and they know that I collect musical things, right? So this goes back to June now. It's Father's Day, and my son gives me a gift. Can I show you what it is? This is the story of my life. Thank you, Joe. Can I show you? I see it. How many people have ever seen one of these before? How many people have never seen a musical wooden frog before? Here's how it sounds. Gonna need a little help. Anthony, would you help me? Come on up. Rhonda, would you help? Come on up. Milo, would you help? Come on up. Ezra, would you help? No? Okay, you can stand right over here. Ezra, would you be first? Milo, sorry. Milo, would you be first? Here, would you take this in your hand? Like this with an open hand? Go ahead and give it a run. Wait a second. Did you practice that?
No, this isn't even fun. You just rub it like this. Not very hard.
Not very hard. So here's what happens. A few months pass, I get a present in the mail. That's the first one I've ever seen. 15 years ago, when my son was 16. I get a present in the mail from my brother. He's not coming home for Christmas. My family celebrates Christmas. Want to see what he gave me? And at first I stuck the frog on the shelf, right? Can you imagine that? Because I had a frog, right? And I brought that frog around with me. But then one day I had a friend like Milo. He was visiting, and he was playing that frog. Go ahead, Milo. Keep going. And I wondered what would happen if I played this frog with that one. You can stop. When I heard the two together, I got super excited. I was like, that is cool. I need more frogs. So you know where I went? Many of you have been there. Maybe you have not yet, Milo, but you know where I went? The frog store. Nice try. I went to a place called eBay. And would you like to see what I found?
That's a lie. That's a lie.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Here's what I found. Rhonda, would you like to give this one a whirl? That end of the stick. Oh, she's got a frog necklace that matches. He's a nice and slow from the way back, right in the front. Not you yet. Okay, you can stop. You can stop. That's good. So here's my favorite part of this gift. Look, we all have lives. Our lives give us this gift of story. If you pay attention, you find a little moment, it becomes a story. Here's my favorite part of it. I was in the northernmost town of the state of New Hampshire, where the Connecticut River begins, for the $1 million prize and the free trip to the moon. What is the name of that little teeny town? Frogtown. Nice try.
Wait, did you practice those lines?
First, what? That's where the river starts, but what is the name of the little town? Whoa, I heard it back there. Where is it? No, oh, where is it? Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. You win the $1 million prize and the free trip to the moon. And you can collect it from me personally in 100 years, I promise. Anyway, I had these 3 frogs, right? I was doing a little program. I took them out. I played them. People enjoyed them. And I love this. Do you love it when people do kind things for no reason at all? What a way to bring light to the world, right? And after my show was over, this lady came up to me and she said to me, you know, I have a frog at my home. And my frog has to live with your frogs. And she goes home while I'm putting my stuff away. And you want to see what she came back with? And you would think after all these big frogs, how could a little frog sound good? Gary? You take with just 2 little fingers. You could stop. So, look. Without winter, could the spring be so beautiful? Could it? Let's greet the winter and let's greet the spring. There will come the day where you'll step outside your house and feel the sun's warmth. It'll be stronger than it can be in the middle of winter. And pretty soon you'll hear this sound. It'll get quiet. You'll get the first one of the season. And then, oh, wait till I get to you. Okay. And then comes the slowly trickle down, fill the vernal ponds, fill the streams. And if you go out one night, you'll know that spring is truly here. Wait till I ask you. It'll sound something like this. Close your eyes and listen. 1 second longer in a few days. Before you know it, here's what's happening. Without the winter, could the spring be so glorious? So go on downstairs, 2 restrooms down there. There's a whole bunch of delicious things. We'll see you back for a second half of beautiful beads adding to our necklace, including these 2 people right here.
Thank you. Well, since we began this concert as a benefit, we've made the food bank of Western Massachusetts one of our beneficiaries, and we're also pleased to be sharing that having as a second beneficiary in an equal amount the Ohketeau Center this year. Now, food insecurity is kind of a hidden problem in some ways, but it was a very serious program to begin with, and then the pandemic came, and now inflation has hit. And the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts is one of the organizations that's really doing something, and it's one of the major organizations in this area that is acting on food insecurity. And I noticed on my way in the side door that there's a Hilltown Church's food pantry here in this church, which is one of the part of the network of the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts. So right here is an example of their work. Part of their mission is providing food to food pantries, meal sites, shelters, emergency food assistance to individuals, families, seniors, and people with disabilities. And they even have a couple of farms growing produce for these programs and for schools in high poverty school districts. And they're also working to develop long-term solutions to underlying causes of hunger in our region. So I would just like to say briefly, I'd like those of you here, if you didn't have a chance, there's a little bit of literature on the back bench, on the pew up against the wall on that side of the chapel. And also I'd like to invite people who are seeing this virtually on a streaming platform to check out our Facebook page, where there's a GoFundMe that you can contribute through to the causes that we're supporting tonight. And that will be the Winter Solstice Celebration is the name of the Facebook page. So, and also I'd like to invite people here who may not be fully aware of the food bank to consider contributing not only with your generous donations tonight, if you so choose, but also to consider also supporting it during the rest of the year. And I know that we have 2 people who are very close and long-time members of the Solstice family who are in the Bike for Food program. So thank you for coming and helping support this cause, and also for being part of this community tonight.
Now I'd like to invite up Rhonda Anderson. She is Inupiaq Athabascan from Alaska. She is Western Massachusetts Commissioner of Indian Affairs and founder and co-director of the Ohketeau Cultural Center and Native Youth Empowerment Foundation. And she will be speaking about our second beneficiary tonight, the Ohketeau Center.
All right, so Pagalagisi, Kun Luksama, Ashfield, Miyot, how you doing? Good, thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing, I guess, with Ohketeau Cultural Center. Who's heard about us before? Oh my gosh, most of you have heard about That's so awesome. Do you know how we started? Anybody want to know how we started? Yeah. So in 2017, early 2017, I would say around March of 2017, does anyone, Carlos Uriona and Jennifer Johnson from Double Edge Theater were sent on a fact-finding mission. Dun, dun, dun. So they do what is called I'm going to get this wrong because it just left my brain. They have a festival that goes down the street and it ends at the lake, and they wanted to have an indigenous point of view. They believe this is a special place. Where's the indigeneity here? And the historians here said, no native people ever lived here, and they don't live here now. So they didn't take that for granted, thankfully, and went on a mission. They went to UMass to hear my longtime friend and co-director at Ohketeau Cultural Center, Larry Spodek-Roman, speaking about what it means to be a water protector, as Nipmuc means freshwater people. And I went there not only to support my longtime friend Larry, but Anthony and I had just came back from Ochete Shakowing Camp at Standing Rock, and it's like family. And so supporting family, seeing other people we know, and I was bookended by them, Jen on one side and Carlos on the other. And so we started this relationship. Well, let me introduce you to some folks, I said. So I did. I started introducing, Bonnie Hartley, who's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Mohican Stockbridge Munsee, Cheryl Tony Hawley, who's the Nipmuc Chief, other people that are doing incredible work in this area, and Stacy Klein, who's amazing. She says, we just got a renovation grant. Maybe we can renovate this building and turn it into a library so people can read about Indigenous people. I said, hey, okay, why don't we turn it into a cultural center so you can have relationships with Indigenous people and get to know who is here, what we need, and learn about us, have us create this relationship of reciprocity. And that's how we started. Yeah. It's been a long time in the making. Relationships when you're working with BIPOC folks, it can have a lot of bumps in the road, but it's also beautiful. And the reciprocity is definitely there. They're our fiscal sponsors. We share the land. We are land stewards. We have land tenure. Our space is within the Double Edge property. But more than that is now we have a voice, an Indigenous voice, representation, agency over our identity. How many of you have seen my curated panels, Living Presence? Yeah. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you do. Go to ohketeo.org. You can see what we're about. You can see the videos. I've done 7 panels so far that focus on indigeneity, Indigenous voices, representation, and how you can be good allies and accomplices. So thank you very much. I have brochures. There are some in the back by the door, and there's some by the cookies, because we all love cookies. But I wanted to bring this braid of sweetgrass. It's not necessarily from my culture, but it's from here. And the 3 pieces that are braided represent your body, mind, and soul. It can also represent communities being braided together seamlessly and tight. This is the hair of our Mother Earth, which we all collectively share. And she smells so sweet and brings only sweet things to your life. So I want to give this gift to Bekki. So thank you. Koya nakpak.
Thank you, Rhonda. Rochelle Wildfang is a published poet, storyteller, and librarian in Williamsburg, interested in the possibilities of words, especially on a cold winter's evening in a candlelit room, a fire in the stove, a cat nearby, and snow swirling outside the window, lit by a waning crescent moon. Rochelle's story will be Jimmy Scarecrow's Christmas by Mary E. Wilkins Freeman.
So Mary E. Wilkins Freeman was a New England person who was born, I think, in 1830, around that time. Anyway, she wrote stories about small New England towns. And many of her stories had to do with probably congregational churches. They're funny stories and ironic stories. And I found this one on Project Gutenberg, which I just wanted to pass along. It's a good place to find things that you might not have seen in print, but have been collected and are free to the world. It's a very cool thing. So this is called Jimmy Scarecrow's Christmas. And the thing about Jimmy was he liked being useful. So in winter, his greatest grief was the lack of occupation. It was his very first winter, and when the sun shone across the corn stubble like a hard yellow eye, he just felt terrible sad. But at Christmas, his heart nearly broke. Because on Christmas Eve, Santa Claus was flying over the farm where he lived with Aunt Hannah and little Betsy. And he called out, "Santa Claus, here I am. Give me a present. I was good all year. I kept the crows out of the corn." But Santa Claus didn't hear him. And he felt forgotten. And the next day, Christmas Day, Aunt Hannah was sewing on a crazy quilt, and little Betsy was at the window with a doll baby that Santa Claus had given her. And she was watching the snow fall on the field and on Jimmy Scarecrow, who was getting whiter and whiter. And she asked Aunt Hannah, "Does Santa Claus bring the Scarecrow a present?" And Aunt Hannah said, "No, silly, he's a scarecrow." She said, "Well, I wouldn't want to be treated like that if I was a scarecrow." Aunt Hannah finished that crazy quilt. You know what a crazy quilt is, right? Yeah, so it's like all mixed up like that. She said, "Well, you know, I've made a quilt for every bed in the house. I'd give it away if anybody wanted it." And then she busied herself around. She got some plum pudding all wrapped up, and she took her cape with her hood and took the plum pudding down the road to her sister. And then Betsy decided to put on her shawl and go out to the field to visit Jimmy. She had her doll baby under her arm, and she said, "Merry Christmas!" And he said, "Merry Christmas to you." She said, "I brought you a present." And she took the doll baby and tucked it under Jimmy's coat. She said, "Be sure to keep it in your coat so it doesn't catch cold." And he said, "I will. Thank you." And then the wind whistled through Jimmy's rags. She said, "Don't you ever get cold?" And then she turned on her heel and she ran back to the house and returned with the crazy quilt and began wrapping it and tucking it around Jimmy. And then, "Goodbye!" And she ran back to the house. And Jimmy was a little alarmed at the bright colors of the crazy quilt. And he hoped that it was wasn't harmful if it was crazy. But he was the happiest that he had ever been in his whole life for about 2 hours until the snow turned to rain and soaked him through, and the doll baby cried and then was still, and he was afraid she had died. And then the afternoon grew dark and darker, and it became the longest, loneliest night that he ever had. And then about midnight, Santa Claus came back over the farm on his way home to the North Pole. And Jimmy cried, "Santa Claus! Santa Claus!" And he heard, "Who's there?" He said, "It's Jimmy." "Jimmy who?" "Jimmy Scarecrow." And Santa flew down. He said, "You've been standing out here since the corn was ripe? What's that thing wrapped around you?" And Jimmy had to tell him it's a quilt that Aunt Hannah made. "And what's that lump under your coat?" "Well, it's a doll baby Betsy gave me, but I think it's dead." "Nonsense," said Santa. And he took the doll baby out and patted her on the back, and she cried. He said, "She already had the mumps and the measles before she left the North Pole. You know, Jimmy, I could use a fellow like you. And I've never seen a quilt before that wasn't in its right mind. I think I might be able to cure it. Why don't you come with me, Jimmy?" "Are there any crows in the North Pole?" "No, I don't want you to scare crows. I want you to scare away Arctic explorers. Why, if they found the North Pole, they would just whittle it to pieces and put it in their pockets for souvenirs. Oh, no, I could keep you in work for 1,000 years. Come away. I'm in a hurry." "But first, could we get a present for Aunt Hannah and Betsy for next Christmas and a way to keep the crows out of the corn while I'm gone?" "Easy," said Santa. And he took out a stylographic pen and wrote on every fence post, "Crows keep out per order of Santa Claus." And the next day, when Aunt Hannah and Betsy looked out the window, the scarecrow was gone. And Betsy had to confess about giving away the doll baby and the crazy quilt, and she was scolded a little for giving away something belonging to somebody else. But then comes spring. It was a great mystery to everyone when not one crow stepped inside the cornfield. But the greater mystery and surprise came that next Christmas, and Aunt Hannah's was her crazy quilt, but every patch was cut square and true, and she said, it is my quilt, but it's not crazy now." And Betsy's surprise was her doll baby, grown a year older, an inch taller. She could walk and talk. She said, "Mama." She just grabbed her up and kissed her. But what they never, ever knew was that those presents didn't come from Santa Claus. They came from Jimmy Scarecrow. So I hope you all pay attention to those scarecrows out there in those fields. Okay?
We're going to change the order of the program just a little bit tonight and ask our next honored visitor, visual artist public speaker, poet, and Indigenous social justice advocate, Anthony Melting Tallow, Botanist Flying Chief. He's a resident of Chicopee and an enrolled member of the Blackfoot Nation. He has long been an outspoken representative of the contemporary Native experience through his political activism, public speaking, cultural education, and creative vision and voice. His work addresses issues of land dispossession, residential school intergenerational trauma, reframing Indigenous voices, misappropriation of Native imagery, and violence against Indigenous women. He says, "It is my job as an artist to reframe the past, present, and future in a way that brings honor to Indigenous people." Two of his paintings are displayed at the front of the room, and he will be telling his a piece called Carried Prayers, Art, Survival, and Hope. Please welcome Anthony Melting Tallow.
Nestu Botanis. Thank you, everybody, for welcoming me into your circle tonight as we approach the longest night of the year. And being part of this circle means that I feel welcomed and I feel amongst family. I'm a 60 scoop survivor from Western Canada. I was born in Calgary, Alberta in 1968. And although my siblings never set foot inside of a residential school, we nevertheless carry the legacies that were handed down to my generation from the 150-year history of that colonial project in Canada, carried out against our youngest, most innocent. As part of that legacy, I experienced very similar upbringing to my mother and my father, my grandparents, where I was taken at age 5 and I didn't get out of the foster care system until I turned 18. In fact, I walked away from care 1 year before I would have aged out at 19. I figured the streets were better than not being made sure that I ate or went to school or saw a dentist or spoke to a counselor for any of the experiences we had growing up. And so it's been a long road back, and I'm thousands of miles away from my home territory, but I found family here. I feel welcomed in the circle so warmly, and I've never experienced a place in my life that has so warmly outstretched its arms and welcomed me in and made me feel that I belong. I grew up without family, grew up on the streets, and the fact that I'm here sitting with you and sharing in the stories and on some of these longest nights of the year, and it's shed warmth into my heart, and having all of these magical experiences created for me right in front of my eyes. The jazz musicians and the storytellers and the connection to the deep history that exists here is something that I never experienced. So I want to thank you all for bringing me in and making me a part of this experience. Before you sits two pieces that came out of a show that I had at Wisteria-Hearst Gallery in North Holyoke, Massachusetts. And to the right is a portrait of my great-great-grandfather, Many Turning Robes. And the portrait was taken in 1903, and he was, at this particular time, he was advocating for a just transition from the nomadic way of life that we had known for millennia, nomadic great hunters of the plains, the buffalo, so transitioning from that millennial way of existence close to the land. He was advocating in his role as a leader to ensure that future generations would find a way of survival in this modern world. And I shared a story of this really quick with someone that I spoke with here this evening about those deeper connections. and how meaningful they are, and how often people, even non-Indigenous people I've spoken to, that maybe were first generation American and maybe didn't get those stories that were handed down from the old country, the recipes, they were just expected to adopt the American way of life, and buy into the American dream, which for them meant a disconnect from their own heritage. One gentleman I spoke to walks around today with a deep wound in his heart that he doesn't have the stories from the old country or the recipes or the journeys that his grandparents and his own parents took to become, a modern, well-rounded person that he feels that he missed out on. So that's reflective of my own story, where another gentleman I spoke to this evening said about the task of learning his own language, which he never was shared. It was never an option for him growing up. So he took it upon himself to learn and become that person that he was always meant to be. And I think that's powerful, the stories that we have. The second picture that you see there, the name of it is called Fractured Flight. And in Blackfoot culture, the eagle carries our prayers and our thoughts to the Creator, because he flies the highest and he sees the land below. And at this time, at the opposite end of the winter solstice is the summer solstice. And in the week leading up to that great event where the day is the longest, and the ceremonies involve opening the sacred bundles and singing the sacred songs and sacrificing the body so that the people can continue in a good way and the culture could stay strong and the buffalo could return and the people could live in bounty and peace. At the end of that week-long sacrifice that a person undergoes to take part in the Sundance, at the end of the week of that fasting and sacrifice, the first thing that crosses their lips is water. And we can no longer drink that sacred water directly from the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains, from the foothills. That glacial feed is long since been poisoned by fracking and natural gas extraction. And the eagle feather is represented by shards of shale. And so our prayers are grounded. And that sacred drink after that week-long personal sacrifice is bottled water. So there's a break in that sacred continuity. And circles like these that I find myself in and I'm welcome to and I'm very privileged to be speaking at are very powerful for me, because they show me the way that life needs to go forward in a good way. Because we're strengthening our ties, we're strengthening our ties to those that went before us with pride in our hearts and our efforts and our own self-education to bring those forward. So we're mending the circle is what we're all doing in a good way, directly from our hearts. And the old ones say that that's what's going to save us. The Blackfoot word for the newcomers was little brother. And that just tells you that we're here to work this all out together. We're from all corners of Mother Earth, and we're all here to make this experience of going forward and going forward in a good way. And we're here to make that happen. And the stories and the songs that we pass down here today are going to be the strength that future generations are going to look back on and say, look exactly to these nights and say, I'm the story. I'm the future story because of what happened, what I bring forward. And sometimes you feel, the worst feeling is to feel alone, and I know that. But we're not alone. And not being alone means that even in your worst moments when you do feel those feelings, just know that it wasn't all for nothing. That the songs and the stories that you walk away from here today and you carry in your hearts, you're carrying those prayers too. You're the storytellers. You're the strength of the community. You're at the heart of what it's going to take to bring us all forward in a good way. And coming here and being present among this circle of family, which I've never found anywhere else. It took me all my life to find a place like this. And believe me, it is special. There's not too many places that you can go and find this level of community and this deepness of heart that I found. And it means a lot to me, and I always carry that with me. And as an artist, I use my gifts to try to bring that gift that Creator gave me back to the community. As such, 25% of the proceeds of each sale of my work goes toward a foundation I set up in 2015 to address the epidemic of missing murdered Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit. And to date, the foundation, which I call Akiap, which in Blackfoot means toward home, has given out a total of $2,000. And it's meant a life-saving handout to avoid hitchhiking, for car repairs, hotels, medications, food, tolls, gas, you name it, for women that need to escape unsafe situations and avoid the need to hitchhike. And I will always find family here. I'm from southern Alberta, from Treaty 7 territory, which is present-day southern Alberta, and the Blackfoot stretch down into northwestern Montana around Glacier National Park. And some of the oldest DNA in America is on Turtle Island has been found in Montana amongst our people of Blackfoot, stretching back 15,000 years. We have even deeper ties here in the Northeast because we are the farthest Algonquin language stock in the West. So we have linguistic ties going back millennia here in the Northeast amongst the Nipmuc people. Larry Spotted Crow Man and I have talked quite a bit about being long separated cousins. And so go forward in your hearts in a good way and know that even like I said, in your darkest hour, it wasn't all for nothing. Even though you might think that those generations that came before you didn't reach their dreams or didn't accomplish what they set out on this journey to do while they were here on this physical plane, because you exist in answer to every prayer and a desire that they held closely in their hearts. You are that answer. So with that, I just want to thank you again.
Before you go, Anthony told me a beautiful story about how he came by his name. Would you tell that to the people, please?
So I'm not supposed to be here. I fled from Canada in 1997. I ended up in New York State. I lost my older brother, Lorne, melting tallow. He was the second homicide of 2015 in Vancouver, British Columbia's downtown east side. He was murdered. I lost my younger brother, Gabriel, melting tallow on the streets of Calgary, Alberta, Canada in June of 2012. His body was found in steps not too far from ones we made as little children trying to survive on the streets. And I fled from the Canada to escape that same fate. When I flew back in 2015 to the reservation for my brother's funeral, I didn't grow up in the culture. I don't speak the language. It's been a long journey for me to come back and find those stories and unearth that sense of pride that I try to embody every day now. And what that meant was taking part in a ceremony that gifted me my name, Flying Chief. And the medicine man traveled up from Montana. And he didn't know that I'd flown thousands of miles from New England to be there. And the ceremony that he wanted to perform for us was a grieving ceremony that allows the person's spirit that passed on to know it's okay to continue their journey back to the relatives and the fires, the ancestral fires in the spirit world. And I sat before him, and he marked my face with sacred ochre and charcoal, and he said, "Your name will be Flying Chief," as a protection name, because you flew thousands of miles to be here. And he didn't know that I'd flown home. And on the flight home, we encountered very extreme turbulence landing at JFK. And this woman was sitting near the window, and she put the blind down, and she looked at me, and she said, "Can I hold on to you?" So I said, "Sure." And she goes, "Why are you so calm?" And I said, I have a protection name, and it's going to be okay. We have protection, and it's going to be okay. And she clung to me until we landed at JFK, and so I knew then that this journey will be long going, and I always see myself as being a very old elder. So if you're free on the 21st, there's a solstice celebration at Ohketeau, and I'm a very proud member of Urban Thunder. And Justin Beatty, he's Saponi in Ojibwe, and he is our drum keeper. So we sing inter-tribal powwow, and you'll see me again sitting around the drum. And the drum is their grandfather, and he brings blessings, and they come through us as singers, and they go back to you, to the community, to take with you in a good way. So thank you, everybody.
Our next performer is a Yiddish singer, songwriter, translator, and storyteller living in Colrain. Oh, wait. That's me. I'm Yosl Kurland, and I'm going to read to you the story, my translation of a story by the great Yiddish writer Shalom Aleichem, who was known as the Yiddish Mark Twain. And I'm going to read it because this story is so perfect, I don't want to miss a single word. It's a monologue by a poor teacher, a malamed, who meets the rabbi's wife on Thursday afternoon, where she is selling candles, Shabbos candles, for the Sabbath Eve. Why is she selling candles? Because a rabbi doesn't earn any money for being a rabbi. And so his wife has to sell candles in order to support the family. Now, the story is called Wenn ich bin Rothschild, if I were Rothschild. And in order to understand the story, you have to understand what every Jewish person knew 100 years ago or more in Ukraine, where Shalom Aleichem lived. That Rothschild was the richest Jew in the world, maybe even the richest person in the world. So This is Wenn ich bin Rothschild, if I were Rothschild. Well, Rebbitzin, here it is a Thursday already, and I don't have anything with what to make Shabbos again. This is my lot in life. But if I were Rothschild, oh, if I were Rothschild, the first thing I would do would be to establish a custom that a wife should always have a dryer roll in her pocket, so that come Thursday, if she doesn't have everything she needs for Shabbos, no problem. And I would buy myself a decent Shabbosdik kapote. Wait, no, before that. I would buy my wife a decent coat. She shouldn't go around the house feeling cold. And I'd buy a house with a few rooms in it. She shouldn't feel that it's so crowded. And I'd buy her pots and pans and a decent oven. She shouldn't feel she hasn't got a proper kitchen to work in. Boy, then I wouldn't have to spend my days worrying about her. I could concentrate on lessons for my students. And you know what else I would do if I were Rothschild? Right away, I'd have a new roof put on the synagogue. A Jew shouldn't have to sit and pray with rain dripping on his head. And after that, I'd build a new bathhouse for the town. A Jew should be able to be clean, Erev Shabbos. And then, a hospital. But not just a hospital, a real hospital, with doctors even, like in a civilized city. You know what I'd do next? I'd make a fund for every child to be able to go to yeshiva, to school. And why stop with the children of Kasrilivkir? I'd make a fund so that every Jewish child anywhere in the world could study in a yeshiva. And so that there should be teachers, I'd make an academy, in Vilna, of course, to train teachers. Now, once we have taken care of the spiritual needs of our Jews, what else is needed? That everyone should have a little parnosa. That is, to be able to earn a living. After all, without the ability to earn a living, people will kill for a scrap of bread. Even the enemies of Israel should have the means to sustain themselves. For what is it that causes people to hate us Jews? It's hunger and war and leaders who blame those things on us. And speaking of wars, if I were Rothschild, I'd make a plan to put an end to war. How, you ask? I'll tell you. What is it that nations fight over in the first place? Territory. This king says this piece of territory belongs to me. That king says it belongs to me. A third king says, you're both behemoths. It belongs to me. And before you know it, they're shooting with guns and cannons, and people are killing one another. Now, if a king wants to conduct a war, what does he need? Weapons. And to buy weapons, what does he need? Money. And where does he get money? From me. That is, if I were Rothschild. So I would say, you need money? Of course I'll lend it to you. And I won't even try to make a profit on it. I'll give you a good interest rate. There's only one condition. You have to use the money to provide a decent job for all of your citizens. They should be able to earn a living and not go on fighting over some miserable piece of earth. And I'll say the same to all the kings, and the wars will stop. After all, why does a country need to fight over a piece of territory if not to give its citizens with what to earn a little parnasa? So with no reason to fight wars, there's no reason for people to hate each other. No reason for one person to call himself a Russian or a Ukrainian or a German or lahavdil, to make a distinction, a Jew for that matter. And then it would be, Bayoim hahu yeh Shem echad u'shmo echad, or to put it another way, the Messiah would finally come. And if the Messiah would come, then even I, that is to say, if I were Rothschild, wouldn't need money. After all, what is money? A piece of paper, somebody puts a number on it and stamps a tzatzke on it, and everybody kills themselves running after it. Money is nothing but a yetzer hara, an evil passion that everyone wants and no one has enough of. Oy. But I'm not Rothschild. And here it is Thursday already. And I haven't got a kopeck. And where will I get enough to buy for Shabbos? Well, I can't leave you with such a sad ending. So I'm going to ask my wife, Peggy, to come up here. And we're going to sing a song of thanksgiving. One of the Psalms. And its closing line is, the one who goes out sowing seeds in tears returns joyfully carrying the sheaves. Oh, and I forgot to say, the melody is from a Ukrainian folk song. And given Shir Hama'alos b'shuv Adonai, Eshivas Tzion v'ayinu kechomim, Az yemale schok binu ulshonenu rina, Az yomru v'agoyim Higdil Adonai lasosim eleh, Higdil Adonai lasosim onu hoyinu smechim. Shuv Adonai yeshev yiseinu kafikim b'negev. Oz yomru b'zirina bedina yikzoru. Haloch yelechu v'acho inas yomeshech hazora. Bo yavo berina no say alumosa. And now I'd like to welcome, or please, everybody, welcome back to the stage the Brian Bender, Robbie Roiter Jazz Duo.
All right. So Joe and I have played together in the Wholesale Klezmer Band for more than 25 years. Is that about right?
You joined us around 1991, was it?
Okay then. So Joe and Peggy are really like family to me, for sure. Anyway, this is a beautiful Hanukkah melody. It's not one of those top 10 melodies that you hear all the time. It's
thank goodness.
It's in an interesting language called Ladino, which is a mixture of Spanish and Hebrew. Ladino, and it's called Ocho Candelicas, 8 candles. But you'll all get your tango on for this one. Linda está aquí, 8 candelas para mí. Hanukkah linda está aquí, 8 candelas para mí. Oh, una candelica, 2 candelica, 3 candelica, 4 candelicas, 5 candelicas, 6 candelicas, 7 candelicas, 8 candelas para mí.
Muchas fiestas hacer, con alegrías hacer. Muchas fiestas hacer, con alegrías hacer. Oh, candelica, 2 candelicas, 3 candelicas, 4 candelicas, 5 candelicas, 6 candelicas, 7 candelicas, 8 candelas para mí. Los pastelicas voy a comer con almendricas y la miel. Los pastelicas voy a comer con almendricas y la miel. Una candelica, 2 candelicas, 3 candelicas, 4 candelicas, 5 candelicas, 6 candelicas, 7 candelicas, 8 candelas para mí. Una candelica, 2 candelicas, 3 candelicas, 4 candelicas, 5 candelicas, 6 candelicas, 7 candelicas, 8 candelas para mí. All right, cool. And now we have another special guest, Mr. Rob Peck. You got your blues harp there, mister?
Why don't you wait? You tell me what the name of that is.
It's a reed instrument, kind of like a harmonica or a concertina or an accordion, and you have to blow into it. And yeah, I have fun with it. I can play Irish tunes up and that kind of thing. Jewish music, blues on it, but I'm going to leave that to the true blues harpist over here.
Who is that masked man?
producing a Christmas Day Hanukkah Children's Theater Festival, if anyone's interested. It's going to be at the Majestic Theater in East Hampton, and it's going to feature Anna doing a puppet show, an original puppet show, and also a theater company that we both work with from Connecticut called the Grumbling Griffins. So there's some information out there about it. Anyway, thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing the rest of the program.
Tim Van Egmond, storyteller and folk singer, has been performing for over 35 years throughout the Northeast and beyond. He is an artist educator in school residencies, performer at libraries, senior centers, museums, and festivals, and a New England States touring program roster artist. He also plays, well, you've seen this before, hammer dulcimer for concerts, contra dances, and special celebrations. He lives in the woods of Montague, and he will be telling the 12-month brothers.
So John Porcino asked a very important question with his story, which was, who loves winter? And he asked that in a very enthusiastic voice. And I have to confess that when all the leaves are down and the cold weather is coming, I feel a certain sadness. And I take comfort in this story. This is a Greek folk tale. Once there was a poor widow who had 5 children and not so much as a penny to raise them on. And the only work she could find was once a week, a gentlewoman in the neighborhood had her come in to bake her bread. And the only pay that this woman got for her work was the dough left on her hands. She would take it home, and she would wash her hands in a bowl of clean water, and she would boil this water and make a gruel with it. And with this gruel, they had to be satisfied from 1 week to the next. Now, for all the rich food that the gentlewoman's children ate, they looked like dried mackerel. But the poor widow's children were filled out and chubby like plump red mullet. Now, the gentlewoman's neighbors and friends said, that poor widow takes your children's luck away on her hands and brings it home to bring to her own children. And the gentlewoman believed this. And so the next time that the poor widow was in to bake bread, the gentlewoman didn't let her take the dough home that was on her hands, but made her clean her hands so that the luck would stay in her home. When the poor widow was returning home with tears running down her cheeks and no dough on her hands, the children saw her and they began to cry, and they wept together until she put them to bed, and they cried themselves to sleep. And then at midnight, in desperation, she went out of the house to see if there was something she could find that would help her to feed her children. And out in the countryside, she saw a light in a high place. And she followed that light, and she came upon, when she drew near, she saw it was a big round tent. And from the center inside hung a big candelabra with 12 candles. She stepped inside the tent, and there were 12 young men seated around it, talking with each other. To the right of the entrance were 3 young men holding branches with tree blossoms on them. And to the right of them were 3 young men holding dry ears of wheat. And to the right of them were 3 young men holding bunches of grapes. Each had a bunch of grapes in his hand. And to their right were 3 men huddled over themselves and wearing long furs from knee to neck. When they saw her, they said, "Greetings, good aunt. Come in and be seated." And as she sat, they asked her how she came to be in this place. And so she told them of her plight and her troubles. And seeing she was hungry, one of those in furs got up and set a table for her to eat. And after she had eaten her fill, the 3 young men with the tree blossoms asked her, "And now, good aunt, how do you get on with the months of the year? How do you like March, April, and May? Oh, I like them very well, my lads, she said, for in those months the hillsides and the fields grow green, and the earth, oh, it is so colorful and fragrant with flowers, and all the birds begin to sing. And the next three with the dry ears of wheat said, and what do you think of June, July, and August? Oh, in those months, the warmth they bring, it ripens the crops in the fields and the fruit in the orchards to sustain us. And then the three holding grapes said, and what do you have to say to September, October, and November? Ah, in those months, folk go out to gather grapes to make wine, and they are good besides, because they remind people that winter is coming, so that they go out to gather wood and also get out their warm clothing. And then the ones in furs said, and what do you think of December, January, and February? Ah, now, she said, now those are months that care for us greatly, and we love them very much, because with the cold that the winter months bring, they remind folk to go into corners and keep warm and rest from the summer's labors. And also the rain and the snow that they bring, it moistens the earth and makes ready for the seeds and helps them to grow. And so you see, my lads, all the months of the year are good and worthy, and each does his work. May God preserve them. And 11 of the young men made a sign to the first of the ones that was holding grapes. And he got up and he left the tent and he went out, but he came back in again soon, and he was holding a large stopper jar, which he gave to her and said, here, Auntie, take this home with you to raise your children on. Oh, may your years be many, and may the hour be good to you, good aunt. And so she went home, and she arrived there just about dawn and found her children still sleeping. And so she set the jar down, and she took out the stopper, and it was filled with gold pieces. Her heart was so full with joy it nearly burst. As soon as it was well and truly light, she went out and she bought bread and cheese to bring home to her children, and the little dears ate their fill. Now the gentlewoman heard about this and quickly went over to see how this could be so. And the poor widow told her all about the young men and their generous gift. Now the gentlewoman was consumed with envy. And so that night, after her husband and children were sleeping, she slipped out of the house and went into the countryside and found her way, following that light, to the tent with the 12 young men. She entered the tent and greeted them, and they said, greetings, mistress. How is it that you have consented to visit us? And she said, oh, I am poor, and I've come to you for help. Ah, they said. Well, how do you get on with the months of the year? How indeed, she said. Each one is a sore trial. No sooner do we get used to the heat of August than those fall months come along and chill us so that we get coughs and colds. And then comes the winter to freeze us and fill the roads with snow to keep us prisoner in our houses when we can't go out. And then those spring months come along and they stay cool so long, they seem to make the winter last longer. Oh, and I forgot to tell you about that lame John of a February who limps by so slowly. And then the summer comes to stifle us. It's mad to stifle us with their heat. So you see, my lads, our life with the months may curses befall them. It's a dog's life. Well, the young men made a sign to the second of those who held the grapes. And he went out, and he brought in a large stopper jar, which he gave to her, and said, take this home with you and lock yourself into a room before you open it. And she said, I will. And joyfully she left and she rushed home and she got there about dawn and she shut herself into a room and then she began to open the lid and poof, it burst off of the jar and out came a bitter wind that pelted her with hail and freezing rain and blinding snow and then out came a cloud of biting and stinging insects that assailed her, and they took turns with her as she screamed and struggled at the door. Finally, she got it open, and she fled out into the darkness, pursued and harried, and she was never seen again. But the widow with the pure heart and the golden tongue, the sweet tongue, she came up in the world, and she became a great lady, known far and wide for her generosity to all. And her children flourished each and every month of the year.
Rhonda Leventhal has been performing and teaching, sharing her passion of the power of story for over 3 decades. Putting laughter in the belly and smiles in the hearts of listeners in schools, libraries, festivals, and more throughout the country and beyond. This February, she'll be telling stories as part of the International Storytelling Festival in Marrakesh, Morocco. She has a one-woman show about Puritan New England called The Prince of Pirates and the Witch of Wellsfleet, which she will be performing here in Ashfield, thanks to a generous grant by the Ashfield Local Cultural Council. And she lives here in Ashfield. So keep your eyes open for details about her show.
Thank you. So this story I'm going to tell you is from American folklore, whatever that means. It was found by another storyteller, Pleasant de Spain, who found it in just a small paragraph and created it into this story that I'm going to tell you right now. Old Joe lived in a big old house out in the country by himself. He was born and raised in that house. In fact, he raised a family of his own in that very house. But now his children were off raising children of their own, and his wife had passed on, and so now he lived there by himself. He had lots of memories in that house. He remembers playing hide-and-go-seek with his brothers and sisters, and he had such a good hiding spot that none of them ever found him, nor did he ever divulge where it was. He remembers coming home from school every Wednesday as a child to the smell of freshly baked bread that his mother made in the old wood-cooked stove. He was the envy of all of his friends. And he remembers with great fondness, with great kindness of his father going out to the barn with him and hitching up the horse and buggy, the old horse and buggy, and going into town to do errands. Now, he had some company on the farm. He had chickens and goats, and every now and then he'd get a pig, and he'd have a bunch of cows. And he had one cow, he named her Molly. He liked her the best. She had this odd marking on her. It was like a squiggly oval that wrapped over her back and didn't quite meet underneath her belly. But his greatest companion of all was his friend Sam. Now, if you walked out of Joe's house down the hillside into the gully and up the other hillside, that's where Sam's house stood. Joe and Sam, they were childhood friends, and they spent a lot of time together as children and as adults. And just like Joe, Sam's children were off living lives of their own, and his wife had passed too, and he was also alone. So they would get together nearly every day. They'd help each other out in each other's farm, and oftentimes they'd meet in Joe's house, and they'd sit by the table looking out over the land to where Sam's house was. They'd make bread in that same old wood stove together and homemade butter and jam, and they'd sit at that table and they'd shoot the breeze. But one day, Joe and Sam, they got into an argument over a calf that had wandered on to Sam's property. Now, Joe, you know that calf is mine. She wandered onto my property and she's mine. Now, Sam, don't, you always do this. You know that calf has the same markings of my cow, Molly, and she's mine. Now, Joe, no, you know how things work around here. Now, Sam, you are so stubborn. You're just a stubborn old man. Will you just stop being so stubborn? And, well, you know what happens when arguments happen. The insults flew so much that they pushed the two men aside, turned their backs to each other, and decided they wanted nothing else to do with each other. Well, of course, this was hard for these two older men. Joe, he would try to busy himself in the barn, going out more often to be with animals, take care of small things around the house, spend a little more time with his favorite cow, Molly. He even tried making bread by himself in that same wood stove, but it wasn't quite the same. Well, one day, he got a knock on the door, and when he opened it up, there was a young man standing there. He had a sack on his back and a friendly smile on his face. "Excuse me, sir. My name is Joe. I'm a carpenter, and I was wondering if you had some work for me to do." Well, Joe was so lonely by then that he invited the young man into the house, and they sat at that same table that he and Sam would often sit at, looking out over to Sam's property. They had some bread and butter and jam, and after a while, Joe decided he liked the young man. And he said, "You know something? I do have a project for you to do. You see that stream running through that gully right there? Well, that wasn't there just yesterday, gosh darn it. My neighbor Sam put that there to spite me. Well, if he can do that, I'm going to do one better than him. I want you to build me a fence that's so high that I can sit here in my house and I don't have to look over at Sam's property at all." "Well, I have the tools. If you have the wood, I think I'll do a job that you like." And so the two men went out to the barn and they got some boards that Joe had lying around, and the two men brought the boards down into the gully where the stream now ran through it. And the carpenter got to work, and Joe went into the barn and hitched up that horse and buggy, and he went into town to the sound of hammering and sawing. He stayed away all day. And when he came back, he put the horse and buggy into the barn, and as he came around the corner of the house, his jaw nearly dropped to the ground. His eyes bugged out. He started tripping over his own feet as he went down that hillside. For instead of a fence, that carpenter had built a bridge over that stream of the finest woodwork. And coming across that bridge was Sam, with his hand outstretched and a smile on his old bony face. "Gosh darn it, Joe, I never would have thought about making a bridge. Look, you're right, that calf was yours. And besides, Joe, I just want to be friends again." Now, Sam, you always do this. You always do this. You know that calf was yours, and you were right. And yeah, I've missed you too. I missed you too, Sam. And the two old men, they gave each other a big hug. And by the time they finished their embrace, the carpenter had packed up his tools already, and he was already going up the hillside. And Joe called after him, young man, I'd like you to stay on. I have some more projects for you to do." And the young man turned around and he said, "That's nice of you, Joe. I'd like to stay on, but you see, I have more bridges to build." And he turned and walked on down the road.
Christy Grecsek is a writer, singer, sometimes songwriter, and actor who works in nonprofit arts administration and loves to read things out loud. Before she joined, this just threw me a second. Before she joined our band of stalwart storytellers, she and her partner were arguably our most loyal attendees over the years, wearing these bear hats. She will read her original poems, Goldfinch and Dark-eyed Junco, following which she will be joined by Tim Van Egmond to sing Snow, a song by Loreena McKennitt, adapted from a poem by Archibald Lampman.
Hello, everyone who stayed so late. Thank you. A couple of years ago, I wrote some poems to celebrate the birds that are found at our local feeders in New England in the wintertime. The first one is called Goldfinch. January goldfinch. Hardly any gold, just a grayer, drabber hint of yellow wealth he'll hold. Thistle seed will feed him through the winter cold, till seeds grow into thistle plants and purple blooms unfold. Then, finch's summer plumage in sunlit flights behold a treasure trove of truer worth than can be bought or sold. And then and the next one is called Dark-eyed Junco. In winter, on a cloudy day, when earth is chalk and skies are gray, the junco hops upon the snow to search for seeds that fall below. Her feathers, ash and white and ink, and her beak of palest pink reflect the winter-colored sight of snow and trees and pearly light. To some folks, Snowbird is her name, but Dark-eyed Junco means the same small hopping bird of stone gray slate, whose colors winter imitates. Thank you. I just want to acknowledge, while Tim's getting his mic set up, that Loreena McKennitt is if you don't know of her, look her up. She's an amazing Canadian artist. She does a lot of kind of Celtic-y music, and she has set a lot of old poems to her own music and has done a lot of her own stuff, and she is amazing. And I wanted to present this song tonight because, well, I didn't know there was going to be a major snowstorm and that some of the folks here would have 2 feet and may not want a song about snow, but I figured it was seasonal. So it's a song about snow. Sorry for those of you who spent the day roof raking. And yeah, she gave us permission because this is a nonprofit event to raise money for the food bank and the Ohketeau Center. So we got permission from them to perform this tonight. Thank you. meadows and far-sheeted streams lie still without a sound, like some soft minister of dreams. The snowfall hoods me around, wood and water, earth and air, silences everywhere. Save when it lonely spells, some farmer sleighs urged on, with rustling runners and sharp bells, swings by me and is gone. From the empty waste I hear a sound remote and clear. The barking of a dog to cattle is sharply pealed, born echoing from some wayside stall or barnyard far afield. Then all is silent and the snow falls setting soft and slow. Evening deepens and the gray folds closer, earth to sky. The world seems so shrouded, so far away. Its noises sleep and die. Secret is yon buried stream, plod dumbly on and dream, and dream. I dream, and dream. I dream, and dream. Thank you. And we have reached the end. We're going to do a closing song, which is a round, which we love to teach you. And then if it works out, we'll split you in half and we can do a round a couple times and just go on into the solstice and the winter. So if the rest of the cast can come on up and we'll do our round. Down here, if I remember correctly. Oh, right. The lyrics are in your program. Oh, we need a special guest bear to come up here and help lead us. Hi, guest bear. We do have a special guest bear right here on site. All right. Sonny, can you give us a D on the piano, please? going to line it out, and then you can sing it back to me, so we're all going to kind of learn it here. So deep, I think that was our deep. Deep down in the belly of the night, sing it back. Deep down in the belly of the night, dream deep winter dreams. Dream deep winter dreams, and lie safe in your grandmother's arms. And lie safe in your grandmother's arms, still as a seed. Still as a seed. Still as a seed. Still as a seed. Let's put it all together. Deep down in the belly of the night, dream deep winter dreams, and lie safe in your grandmother's arms. Still as a seed. Still as a seed. One more time, and we'll split up. Deep down in the belly of the night, dream deep winter dreams, and lie safe in your grandmother's arms. Still as a seed. Still as a seed. Deep down in the belly of the night, dream deep winter dreams, and lie safe in your grandmother's arms. And lie safe in your grandmother's arms. Still as a seed. Deep down in the belly of the night, dream deep winter dreams, and lie safe in your grandmother's arms. And lie safe in your grandmother's arms. Still as a seed. Still as a seed. Still as a seed. Dance then wherever you may be, for I am the Lord of the dance, said she, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said she. Dance, dance wherever you may be, for I am the Lord of the dance, said she, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said she. Dance, dance wherever you may be, for I am the Lord of the dance, said she, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said she. Dance, dance wherever you may be, for I am the Lord of the dance, said she, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said she. Dance wherever you may be, for I am the Lord of the dance, said she, and I'll lead you all wherever you may be, and I'll lead you all in the dance, said she. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming and staying.
It wouldn't be a show without you, so it's sure good that you came. And we're all deeply grateful for whatever continued support you can give
primarily by letting friends know that they can catch some of this on YouTube. And if they are able to catch some of it, maybe they also can continue to contribute. Because really that's the whole idea, is a good time for a great couple of causes. Thanks again for being here.